Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd now like to turn the call over to Deb Rivera. Deb, you may begin.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We appreciate and thank you for joining us today for our data.census.gov Q&A webinar in June of 2023. My name is Deb Rivera, and I will be the host for today's event, where we will be using the next hour to address your questions related to the data search platform, data.census.gov. Joining me today for this webinar is my colleague Maria Valdesera, and together we will be providing support to our speaker by sharing helpful links through the chat panel and helping to address questions as well. Now, before we get started, I do want to take some time to go over how today's session will run. So our webinar is scheduled for a 1-hour duration. The first portion of our webinar, which is approximately 25 minutes, will be a brief presentation, which will cover some of the most commonly asked questions about data.census.gov. So we encourage all of you to follow along the presentation and also pay close attention to the questions that were selected and the answers that were provided for each question, because these may address questions of your own. And this will also help us to prevent duplicate questions and maximize the time that we have with you all. So that is for the first half of our webinar. During the second half of our webinar, we will then move on to the live question and answer session. At that time, we will be taking your questions through the WebEx audio. So participants who would like to ask a question over the WebEx audio are welcome to use the raise hand icon that appears either next to your name or along the bottom of the WebEx screen. Once you click on the raise hand icon, this will tell us that you have a question, and then we will go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself to ask your question. So that is how the next hour will run, but a couple of other items regarding the Q&A panel. So we do have, and we want to encourage everyone to use the Q&A panel to submit questions. As of right now, the Q&A panel is closed. And this is just to allow us to cover the most commonly asked questions. But we will be activating it at around 2:25. So if you want to send questions, you can look out for the Q&A panel. We will let you know when that's active. And then a final reminder that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be made available through the Census Academy website. We will be sending out that link through the chat as well, so please keep an eye out. Now I would like to turn our presentation over to Tyson Weister. Thank you, Tyson.
Great, thanks Deb, and thank you all so much for joining the webinar, data.census.gov, questions and answers. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work on the communication team for the data platform. So what we have planned today, as Deb mentioned, we're going to start with answers to commonly asked questions. And we've pulled some of the common questions that we get through our email box, as well as the conferences in our interactions with data users, and grouped them into a few different categories. So first, I'm going to cover answers to common questions about finding data generally. Then we'll talk about questions about upcoming releases, questions about selecting your geography, and then questions about downloading and printing. And then, of course, the question period at the end of the webinar that Deb described earlier. So let's go ahead and dive right into answers to commonly asked questions. One of them are what data are available on data.census.gov. So what we're showing here on the left-hand side of the screen are, at a high level, the data sets that are available, the most popular ones, and the vintages that are available. So what you'll find on our data platform is American Community Survey data back to 2010, decennial census data back to the census 2000, economic census and selected surveys back to 2012, and then we have started onboarding the population estimates program. So we have a few tables from 2019. That is, at a high level, what you'll find on our site. But if you'd like a very detailed listing, I encourage you to check out the link. We will be sharing this slides after the presentation. And when you visit the link on the left, the ask.census.gov link, it provides the answer in FAQ format with a table that shows each detailed data set, the different types of tables, as well as the availability over time. So that's going to be all inclusive. Always helpful to know what is currently on the site, but going hand in hand, what do I do when I need data that is not available on data.census.gov? Some of the common questions that we get are requests for data from the decennial census prior to the 2000 census. You'll find those in PDFs on the webpage, as well as data through the File Transfer Protocol or FTP site. And if you need any assistance with those resources, you can contact library@census.gov. American Community Survey, we do have data at the Census Bureau from the ACS from 2005 through 2009 that are available through the Application Programming Interface or API, as well as the FTP site. And similarly, there are links included if you would like economic census or econ survey data prior to 2012, data from the population estimates if you want the full availability, as well as the Equal Opportunity Employment EEO tabulation. So encourage you to check out those links to access the data. With that in mind, as far as what data we do have on our site, wanted to start with some common types of questions we get about finding data. And one of those is, how do I find data for multiple topics? Now, you always want to run a separate search for each topic filter unless you want the data cross-tabulated. So let's say you are looking for data for veterans and data for median household income. What this would look like on our site, which hopefully you've used before, you would select the filter for veterans. So on the left, I'm showing that checkbox selection for that filter. And ultimately, that's going to take you to the entire set of tables that we have on our site related to veterans. This includes a table that shows 7.1% veterans. In a separate search, I have selected income and earnings as a filter. That brings me to the entire set of tables on income and earnings, and it includes data for median household income, $64,994. Now, the only time you would want to select both veterans and income simultaneously is if you want the data cross-tabulated. So if you specifically want to look at income of veterans, then you would want to select both of those topic filters together. That combination of search is going to take you to the tables that are cross-tabulated for income and veterans, and showing in the final screenshot the median income of veterans being $43,541. So just keep that in mind. Select all the topics together when you want it cross-tabulated. We have data users who try to select all of the topics that they're interested in all at once, not realizing that they may need to break that out into multiple searches. Another common question, especially as decennial census data tables are really popular right now, I am showing on the screenshots here table ID P1 across two different data sets. So the question that we get is, why does the same table ID provide different layouts? And for the decennial census, they use the same table IDs across different data sets, and sometimes those IDs refer to different table titles and different table layouts. So the key takeaway here is searching by table ID is still great, but if you're working with decennial census data tables, do take a moment to look at the product drop-down menu at the top of the table. Pay attention to what you're clicked into, and if you're not getting the result you expect, you maybe want to change that product drop-down menu to a different data product. One example of this for table P1 on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm clicked into the 2020 redistricting data set. That data set, table P1, is called race, and you can see it provides total population as well as data for the major race groups included below. If you're clicked into that same table ID but chose the demographic and housing characteristics drop-down menu, you would simply get total population data. We get a lot of questions from users about how can I access data for race and Hispanic origin. So the Census Bureau has a wealth of information broken out for all kinds of different race and ethnic groups and all kinds of levels of detail. So there is an entire webinar included in the link at the top showing you specifically how to make the most of searching for race and ethnicity data. What I wanted to cover at a high level for the purpose of this Q&A webinar is that your filters take you down different pathways to different sets of tables. So if nothing else, I do recommend searching for race and ethnicity data using the filters on our site. You'll be looking for checkboxes that match your level of detail. And in this case, on the left-hand side, I've chosen the checkbox for Asian. And what I want to point out is the URL has T equals Asian. So the word Asian was added to the URL. Anytime words are added to your URL, you're going to be taken to what we call the standard tables. You'll typically find the most recent data, and I recommend giving those a first look if you're not sure which checkbox to choose. If you mark other checkboxes, you may notice that they result in codes being added to your URL. So in this case, the screenshot on the right is showing checking the box for Asian alone. That adds T equals 012 to the URL. Again, codes, and that takes you to the iterated tables. They're special sets of tables that are repeated for whichever population groups you chose. So at least knowing that there are two different types of tables selectable through two different types of filters, depending on whether words or codes are added to your URL, should get you pretty far in getting started with race and Hispanic origin data. And again, recommend checking out the webinar at the top for more detail. Another common question we get is, how can I access population density? We do not on data.census.gov have any tables that contain population density information, but you can access the underlying data and make the calculation on your end. So simply find the total population divided by the land area. Total population, you'll be getting that from data.census.gov. Depending on which data set you would like to use, we recommend tables P1, P001, B01003, or the PEP and REST tables. And that's going to give you population totals from 3 of those very popular programs at the Census Bureau. Once you download those population totals, you can get the land area data through a helpful tool called the Gazetteer files. So when you visit the link at the bottom, you'll be able to download the file for your type of geographic area, and there will be a few columns you'll be looking at within the table. There's a column A land, which is the land area in square meters, and a column called A land underscore SQMI, which would be land area in square miles. So that would give you the data between steps 1 and 2 in order to calculate population density. Another common question, how can I access detailed language data? I actually just came from a conference where we had many users, librarians, wondering what languages they should have their books carried in. We do have at the Census Bureau information on detailed language. Your best bet, if you do want that, is table B16001. There are 42 detailed language categories in that particular data table. There were some changes made to that particular table in 2016 that we'll talk about in just a moment. The other option available to you is to create a custom table using our microdata access tool on data.census.gov/MDAT. When you're working in the ACS datasets, there are 2 variables that provide information for languages spoken by people and languages spoken at the household level. And those 2 variables provide over 100 detailed language categories. When you are working with the microdata access tool and creating a custom table, the smallest levels of geography you can use is the state level, or what's called a public use microdata area, or PUMA. Those are statistical areas of about 100,000 people, but they do cover the entire country. So just know that that is available as an option to you. Going back to table B16001, and all of our tables generally have in the upper left of each table a button that says notes. So a lot of times we get requests wondering just about details of particular data sets or data tables, why something isn't available, or what special characters mean in the table, that Notes button is going to give you the technical documentation for the data set and table that you're clicked into. And if you happen to be clicked into the B16001 table, you'll be able to see a link when you scroll down to the 2016 language data user note. And that is an example of a targeted note that's going to tell you all about the changes that were made to this table between 2015 and 2016. There were a few changes between the specific categories of languages shown in the table, as well as many changes to the levels of geography that table was made available for. So all that to say, you may need to access the 2021 data with more high-level geographies in order to get data for the table, or you could potentially roll back and consider the older data from 2015 if you need more detailed geographies. The reason and details of those changes, again, are accessible to you through the handy Notes button and the language data user note. Right, moving on, we also wanted to talk briefly about common questions related to data releases. One of those is, when are the next data releases coming to data.census.gov? Because of the amount of interest and requests on this topic, we have a web page specifically dedicated to educating you about those upcoming releases that are coming to our site. So when you visit the link on this slide, you'll be able to access the information for Decennial Census Release, American Community Survey. They will navigate you directly to those product and program web pages that post the most up-to-date information regarding those releases. And of course, with the 2020 census being such a big program and release with all kinds of data and data products, lots of questions that we get regarding the 2020 census specifically. I did want to share the main 2020 census landing page for you that provides information about the data products, data releases, technical documentation for those products, as well as other questions that you may have about 2020 census. All right, so moving on to selecting geographies, all of the tables on data.census.gov are based and calculated for a particular geographic area. So unless you're accessing data for the US, you're probably selecting a geography or multiple geographies. We have over 200 different levels of geographies to choose from at the Census Bureau, so it can be one of the more complex components of ultimately getting the data that you need. So all this to say, we get a lot of questions about how to choose my geography. One of the most common is, how do I select my city or town? So depending on which state you're accessing data for, you'll typically find your cities categorized as a place. For some states, primarily in the Northeast and Midwest, you may need to check what's called county subdivision. And it's all just about the way that these geographies are legally defined. Typically, towns, townships, and boroughs are commonly found under county subdivision, again, especially in the Northeast and Midwestern states. When you're accessing the data, when you click on the geography filter panel on the left, you'll see a geography level called place, and this is just showing the click for geography place. I followed the prompts and ultimately selected the checkbox for Atlanta City. On the right-hand side of the screen, I went down the county subdivision pathway by clicking geography, then county subdivision, followed the prompts and selected Strafford Town within Strafford County, New Hampshire. So if you're not finding your city or town in place, check county subdivision. And if you're ever selected a geography and aren't sure what the boundaries for that area are, or you'd like some information to make sure that you've selected the correct geography, you can leverage the maps that are available directly on our site. So anytime you've chosen just one geography in the advanced search and then click on the Maps tab at the top, the system's going to do a wonderful job of recognizing that selection, zooming you in on that geography automatically, and then you can really make sense of the area that you're working with and what that selection would give you data for. people that live in the area shaded in blue. So this is showing that process where I went through those steps, clicked maps, and looked at the place filter for Bethel CDP, or census designated place in Vermont. And then in a separate search, I've done the same thing, except I chose the county subdivision label called Bethel Town, Windsor County, Vermont, and it shows me the town county subdivision level on the right-hand side of my screen. So if you're living in Bethel Town, you would know which one of these geographic areas are the one that you actually meant to select. Highly recommend using this map as a great reference tool to make sense of your geography selections. Right, another common question, how do I access data for zip codes? Well, most people on our site want data for people and housing through the American Community Survey or decennial census. If that's what you're looking for, you need to use the geography level called zip code tabulation area. You'll see it in the box at the top of the geography filter panel. That's part of the most commonly used geographies. These ZICTAs are generalized representations of zip codes. If you are accessing data for businesses, you would use the actual zip code level selection called 5-digit zip code. It's in the folder, All Geographies, and it's the very first option. So again, people and housing, you need to use zip code tabulation area. Data for businesses, you need to use 5-digit zip code. For more information, please visit the link at the bottom. And another question, what geographies are available for my data set? Now you could use the notes button and click into the technical documentation that I showed you earlier, or you can actually leverage the order that you choose to select your filters on our site and let the system tell you what's available for your data set. The steps to do this would be to choose your data set first. Here in the upper left of this screenshot, I'm showing an example where I've selected the survey filter, ACS 5-year estimates detailed tables. Then I clicked the geography filter panel and clicked the summary levels tab. So because I've already selected the surveys filter, the site is only showing me the geographic levels that are compatible with this particular data set. It's hiding every other option from my view that is not compatible with that selection. Another common question, why is my geography missing from the table or filter panel? This is usually an instance where you were clicked into the ACS 1-year estimates and you should be clicked into ACS 5-year estimates. So the reason for this is ACS 1-year estimates have a minimum population threshold of 65,000 people or more. The ACS 5-year estimates are available for all geographic areas, regardless of population size, down to the block group level. So if you've ever are having a situation where you're not seeing all of the geographies in your table, most likely if you just switch over to 5-year estimates, that issue will be resolved for you. For example, in this screenshot, I'm clicked into 5-year estimates and it's showing me data for Adams County, Indiana, with the population of 35,000, which would not have been eligible for the ACS 1-year estimates. Another reason why you may see geographies missing from the columns of your table is that you did not choose the vintage of geography that's compatible with the particular data vintage for the table that you're working with. So one example of this is that census tracts are redefined with each decennial census. On the left, I'm showing in a selection for census tract 6120. And in the 2020 vintage on the right-hand side, that census tract was actually split into two separate tracts, 6120.01 and 6120.02. So with that in mind, if you go through the filter panel, make some selections. Here I've selected California and the 2010 vintage of that census tract, 6120. And then I click and access data, in this case through the ACS 5-year estimates. You will only see columns for the geographies that are compatible with that particular vintage of the data set that you're working with. So because the 2020 ACS data were tabulated in according to the 2020 census boundaries, it's not going to show me any column in my table for this 2010 census tract selection. So that's why we only see data in our table for California, but the census tract is missing. The fix would be to select the correct census tract that's compatible with this particular data set. If you'd like to know which vintage of geography your data are tabulated for, and you're working with ACS data, there is a very helpful website, the Geography Boundaries by Year page that's included in the link at the bottom of the screen. When you get to the page, you'll see a number of tabs at the top, and you'll simply click into whichever tab that you're working with through the ACS data, and then the information below will show you the geographic boundary reference year for that particular data set. Other resources for comparing 2020 to 2010 geographies, we have a fantastic map interface called TigerWeb Decennial. This allows you to look visually at the 2020 boundaries and the 2010 boundaries. There's even a slider that you can use and scroll right and left across your screen in order to see the boundary changes very clearly in real time. It's a great resource to help make sense of those changes. If you prefer that information in a file format rather than a visual map, we also produce relationship files in the second link on this webpage. And all of the help for this information is available through geo.geography@census.gov. From our emails, we also get a lot of questions. How do I access data for all census tracts in my city? In the past couple of years, we've added many checkboxes that allow you to select collections of geographies in bulk. And the trick can sometimes be that you need to find the appropriate within other geographies option and then follow the prompts. So this screenshot is showing an example where we've selected geography filter on the left, chose census tracts, chose California, and then rather than go through the default pathway through the folders included below, you'll just sometimes need to click that within other geographies and choose that you want to access the census tracts in your place or city to ultimately get you to the checkbox that you're looking for. In this case, all census tracts fully or partially within Palo Alto City, California. If you're having trouble finding the specific geography you need, feel free to write us in and we can help direct you to the appropriate pathway. We also get questions, how can I find the geographies for an address? The Census Bureau has a tool called the Census Geocoder where you can type in an address. Here on the left-hand side, I've typed in the address for the Census Bureau's regional office in Burbank, California. Click Get Results. There will be a variety of sections on that particular list of results. Here I've scrolled to the census tract section and looked at the name. So it's telling me that this address falls within census tract 3105.01. And then the last step, if you want to access the data, would be to select that geography filter in the filter panel on data.census.gov in order to access the data tables. So we don't have an option currently for you to search by address directly on data.census.gov, but you can use the geocoder and our site combined in order to meet that need. If you're working with GIS software, we get many questions. How can I match the GeoID from the data.census.gov downloads to the TigerLine shapefiles? When you download data from data.census.gov, the GeoID will be longer. So I'm showing on the left-hand side, the GeoID for Census Tract 3105.01 in Los Angeles County, and the GeoID from the TigerLine shapefile on the right-hand side of the screen. There are extra characters from everything before and including US on data.census.gov compared to the TigerLine shapefiles. So those characters do have meaning. They tell you the 3-digit summary level, geographic variant, and geographic component. But if you're going to match up the data to create a map, you would need to delete those extra characters. We have a easy to use formula in Excel that's described in the FAQ at the bottom of the screen. And finally, wanted to cover a couple of quick questions about downloading and printing. One is, how can I get the correct download format and layout? There are two primary ways that you can download data from our site. One of those ways is by clicking either the Excel or CSV buttons. That's always going to give you output that looks similar to what you're seeing on screen. It's going to be optimized for it being readable to you and printable from that format. If you're trying to work with the data through machine readable output, you probably want the zip button. So that's what people tend to miss, is not realizing that they need to click the zip button in order to get the file format that they're expecting. The output of that format is completely different from what you're going to get by clicking the Excel or CSV buttons. So check it out if you're not finding what you need. When you use those options, do keep in mind if you're using the Excel or CSV export option, any of the customizations you've made on screen will carry over. So if you've turned off the margin of error or hid columns, that will be reflected in your exported output. If you use the zip file format, we don't currently have any functionality in place for those customizations to carry over. So you're going to get the same output regardless. How can I download a PDF? We haven't built PDF functionality into the site. Your best bet is to click the Excel button, open up that output, and when you click into the Data tab, do keep in mind that the Excel output is optimized for printing. This means that your labels for your geographies and data variables will carry over across pages. So you could go ahead and print it out or make a PDF from the print to PDF option. And also lots of questions about printing maps and profiles. We have not officially built print functionality for those. You can press Control-P while you're on the map screen or the profile screen in order to get some sort of a print output. We also find that taking screenshots is a really great way to have the best output and control over what you're going to be getting from that. So recommend that as an option. There's nothing currently as far as exporting or printing maps. And as we transition to your questions, wanted to cover where you can learn more about data.census.gov. If you click the help button under the single search bar on our site, it will take you to a resource page with educational materials to help you make the most of our site, including short videos, full-length recorded webinars, answers to your FAQs, PDFs with step-by-step screenshots, and much more. Who can I contact to get help or provide feedback? There is a link directly under the single search bar with a feedback. That will shoot an email to census.data@census.gov. We are continuing to improve our site based on feedback from users, and you can always send your data questions to us, and it will come right to our team for response. Also, how can I get hands-on practice? We have a collection of workshops. These are participatory, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length on a variety of topics. So there's a basic, advanced, and mapping on data.census.gov. We have a workshop on creating those custom tables we talked about using the microdata access tool. And there's a webinar on using the Census Application Programming Interface, or API. These are offered every month, so do check back regularly to find an option that meets your needs and schedule. And if you'd like to sign up for email updates, you can visit the link on the left, subscribe to data.census.gov updates, and that's going to give you our monthly newsletter. It will show you the latest educational opportunities, system enhancements, and data releases to help you make the most of data.census.gov. And with that, we are really excited to take your questions today. I'm going to transition back over to Deb.
Great, thank you. All right, so thanks everyone. As Tyson mentioned, we will soon begin our question and answer session. Today, we will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. Excuse me one moment. All right, sorry about that. So as I was saying, today we will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. To queue up to ask a question, you can use the raise hand icon that is located next to your name in WebEx, or also along the bottom center of the WebEx screen. Now, when we call your name, you are then going to see a prompt that is asking you to unmute yourself. You will need to respond to that prompt and unmute yourself before you can ask your question. We won't be able to hear you until you do. Also be aware that there may be a bit of a lag between the moment that you unmute, so just be mindful of that. And before we move on to the question and answer session, I would like to invite you all to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through an evaluation survey. You can tell us if you found today's webinar helpful, what other topics you would like us to cover in the future, if there's anything that we can improve, etc. We do read all of your comments and we look forward to the ones that you have regarding this presentation. So I will go ahead and put in the evaluation link in the chat. You should be able to see that in just a moment. Okay, there we go. Now, if you have any questions remaining after our session concludes today, please feel free to reach out to one of the email inboxes that are listed here. If you are a member of the public, you can reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination at census.data@census.gov. Members of the media can contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. And for any training requests, you can send an email to ced.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. So with that, I think we can go ahead and transition and see what questions you have. So if anyone has questions that they would like to ask over the line, we ask that you go ahead and use the raise hand icon, and we will we'll start from there. So we'll give everyone a moment to queue up.
Hello. So a couple things. We're interested in knowing, the differences between the data that's in the 2020 census and how it differs from the American Community Survey. I'm at Adams State University, and we love using the data that you all have, and we've been using ACS for quite a few years. And I also don't really know how the 2020 census informs ACS. In other words, was it updated through that, or what is the linkages between those two data sets, if any?
Yeah, thank you for your questions, and it's great to hear that you use the data heavily. In terms of difference between 2020 census and the ACS, I'll talk about a few key differences. So one is in terms of the census being 100% count and the ACS being a survey. It's still a large survey, the largest survey that we do here in the US. So the data collection modes are different. In terms of the content of the tables, the ACS has all the characteristics. So both the decennial census and the ACS cover demographics, so age, sex, race, Hispanic origin, relationship to householder, whether people own or rent their homes, and a few other key pieces of information. But then the ACS has all that detailed characteristics. So if you want to know income, education, health insurance, you're not going to be able to get any of that information from the decennial census. You would need to go to the ACS for that. The census data goes down to the block level, so a little bit more granular geography. The ACS doesn't go all the way down to the block, it goes down to the block group. And then the other difference is that the ACS is conducted every year and the decennial census is conducted every 10 years. And then the last difference that I'll mention is the way that the data are referred to. So the decennial census data is a point in time. The data reflect a picture of the country as of April 1st of the decennial census year. And the ACS data collection is done throughout an entire year's sample. So every month throughout the year, there's a new sample for the ACS. So it really represents more of a period of time data collection rather than a single day or snapshot in time. So those are a few key differences between the different data sets. And why you might use one over another in terms of geographic availability, as well as the ACS having a lot more topic detail. And then how does the 2020 census inform the ACS? I would point you to our ACS experts that could give you some links maybe for some of the methodology. What I can say on a high level, though, is that the decennial census is the base count. That count feeds into how the population estimates are reflected, as well as feeding into the baseline for how the ACS data. So it ultimately ties into the weighting and methodology of the ACS, but it does get updated throughout the decade as well. If you have additional follow-up questions on that part, would invite you to write us in.
That sounds really great. Thank you so much. I think that was one of my key things, was whether the 2020 census actually informs ACS or whether ACS is sort of traveling in its own world. But it sounds like it does inform it to give that baseline in some manners.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Mm-hmm. So just a last question. Is the 2021 ACS the most recent complete data available?
It is. Then the 2022 estimates, the 1 year typically are released in September, and then the 5 year are typically released in December. So you'll see new 2022 ACS data releases later this year.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your help. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, thank you so much for your question. See if we have any others in queue. Tyson, I am not showing any questions in queue as of right now.
Okay. Well, as we're waiting for more questions to come in, I will go ahead and share some additional resources. One is the microdata access tool. I did mention it in the presentation. We have an entire section of our help webpage specifically on using the microdata access tool. Again, this is where you essentially have access to a sample of responses from a survey that we've removed personal information, so you can't identify any particular person or household. We also put additional edits in place to protect the confidentiality of respondents, but then we give you that set of raw data for you to create these custom tables. You don't have to have expert statistical software background. You can use our free tool on our website to create those custom tables. We recommend checking out our resources page if you'd like to learn more about it. So you do typically want to give the pre-made tables a first look, but if that's not meeting your needs, there's more topic detail available through these custom tables. In addition, we focus today on data.census.gov. That data is powered through the API, or Application Programming Interface, which is also publicly available. If you'd like to learn how to make API data requests directly, we encourage you to check out this particular webpage that will show you how to do that through different short videos and educational materials. And also another resource available to you is the Data Dissemination Specialist. So there are local data experts available to you. They're assigned to every state. They host the centralized training at the Census Bureau, including this webinar, which is part of census.gov/academy. And in addition, those local data dissemination specialists can help you with one-on-one trainings. You can request their assistance by emailing census.askdata@census.gov or by calling 1-844-ASK-DATA. And Deb, do we have any other questions that we'd like to cover?
Thank you, Tyson. No, we don't have any additional questions.
All right, if there's nothing else, I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. We look forward to continuing to engage with you and hope you join our webinars and email us in. Thank you so much.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.